will need a pattern, tape, a ruler, the clear ones work best, a pencil with a working eraser, scissors, make sure they're craft scissors and not your fabric scissors, and paper. Any size paper will do, scrap paper, whatever, just as long as it's big enough for your alteration. The first step in altering your pattern is establishing an adjustment line. Typically this line is parallel to the ground when worn. This pattern already has one, but how do you find one if you're not so lucky? On the center front of your pattern piece, find vertical. This is going to be a straight line. You can use the center front of the pattern if it is indeed straight, or you can use the grain line. From there, draw a line 90 degrees perpendicular to the vertical line you established. This is the new adjustment line. Go ahead and repeat on your other pattern pieces at this point before we start the alterations. Some inches out from the vertical line, now draw another very clear vertical line going through the adjustment line, also at 90 degrees. In other words, it's a parallel line to the vertical line that goes through the adjustment line. Now draw another very clear straight line on your piece of paper. It doesn't have to be long, just as long as your alteration length needs to be. The clearer the better, since you'll be connecting the lines together for your alteration. Now, use your craft scissors to cut along the adjustment line all the way through your pattern piece. There's no going back now, so make sure that you did it right. Take the top of your pattern and align your clear lines together. Tape the pattern pieces to the paper so it's secure. Tape, 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 tape. You can see that it's pretty easy to move your bottom up and down, but it's easiest if you draw your line. Now you need to draw the amount of length needed for your alteration. For this one, I lengthened the pattern 3/4 of an inch for demonstration purposes, but a person with a long torso may need to add an additional 2 inches of length, depending on what you determine from your mock-up. With that line now established, it makes it easier to keep the bottom piece perfectly aligned. Match up your clear vertical lines and tape away. Now it's time to true up your pattern lines. Draw to connect your center front. I like using a ruler to make sure it's straight. This next part is pretty tricky, so pay attention. Find your seam lines. These are not going to be your seam allowances, but the finished seam lines of the pattern. Draw a line to connect those seam lines. If you did a small length addition, say less than 1/2 inch, you're safe to connect between the cut of the adjustment line. But for those that added more than 1/2 inch, I suggest starting your line a few inches down from the top edge and ending a few inches up from the waistline. With the seam line adjusted, we now have to alter the seam allowances of the pattern. Measure the original seam allowance of the pattern and draw a new line parallel in the same amount to the new seam lines you just created. Blend to true up those lines to the original pattern. Get out those scissors again. It's time to cut your paper along the new seam allowance lines of the pattern. I sped up the cutting part so you wouldn't have to suffer through it. Cut, 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 do-do-do. Fix the pattern. Do-do-do, because I cut it wrong. Do-do-do. Always double check before you cut. That's something I didn't do. Now repeat the process with the other pattern pieces.